Welcome back to MedPhysio. In the previous session, we had a discussion on the theoretical aspect of reading research paper. Now, moving further, I will be providing you a practical guide for the question that how to read a research paper. So for this, it is important to develop the reading skill. But how? So to answer this question, the person must have a reason to read. And for reasoning out of reading's habit, first thing necessary is interest. The person must interested in something to do. So the person must have developed interest in that particular subject. Secondly, the area of the work should be related to that research, or either research is related to that area of the work. So both are important and essential part of reading skill. And thirdly, they review the article. So for this, the person may assign some time for peer reviewing. So in this, the topic is off to that, but off to that interest, but they might be indulging because of their improvement of some subject, right? Or they might be have some duty as in peer group reader or as in editorial review. So these are the important aspect to develop the research reading skill. Now for this, the major goal is to understand the scientific contributions the authors are making. And this is not an easy task. It may require going over the paper for several times and expect to spend several hours to read a paper, right? Actually, but it is an essential procedure. So for today's session, I will have some objectives, and they are: first is providing the meaning for important skill of reading, like reading critically, reading creatively, make a note of it, summarize the article, and so on. Secondly, providing the checklist for each reading skill. And thirdly, I will be giving you a tips on how to prepare one page summary for the article that might be important for the literature review. So to begin with this reading critically, reading a research paper must be critical process. You should not assume that the authors are always correct. Instead, be suspicious about it. And for this suspicious aspect, you must have the questions. Here I have provided you some checklist for this things. So in this checklist, the topmost question is, are authors solving the right problem? So of course, it begins with the problem identification. Then moving on to further, are there simple solutions that authors do not seems to have considered? And even what are the limitations of the solutions? And next, are the assumptions the authors are making reasonable? That also is an essential aspect. Next is the logic of the paper clear and justifiable given the assumption, or is there in flow of the reasoning? So it will clear out that hypothesis is in line of reasoning or not. Next is, if the authors present the data, did they gather the right data to substantiate their arguments, and did they appear to gather it in correct manner? So it's about presentation of the data or the results, right? Next is, did they interpret the data in reasonable manner? And lastly, would other data be more compelling? So that's about your results and discussion and conclusion aspects. So it will be critically from problem solving to this conclusion aspect in the whole process, the reading should be very critically. Each and every aspect you have to look into it. Moving towards the next, reading creatively. That's also one of the guidelines for reading the research paper. So reading a paper critically is easy. In that, it is always easier to tear something down than to build up. Reading creatively involves harder and more positive thinking, right? So for this, some checklist is over here. So the questions will be, what are the good ideas in this paper, right? So idea must be considered for the creativity part. So do these ideas have other applications or extensions that the authors might not have brought or thought of? Next, can they be generalized further? And then, are there possibly improvements that might make important practical differences? That is important part for making into the applied research. If you were going to start doing research from this paper, what would be the next thing you would do? So from your mother's study, which is already been established, from that what are you going to do in the further aspects of the research? So it will provide you the uniqueness. And this read critically is sometimes is might confusing as well. But still, by answering this question, you must create the good reading habit for the research paper. Next, make the notes as you are reading the paper. So for this, many people cover the margin of their copies of the paper with the notes. Some people use the opposite side or the blank paper of that research article, and some of you are doing the highlight that part. Use whatever style you prefer, and if you have any questions or criticism, write them down so you do not forget them, because you are reading this second time, third time, or in the same topic there are several articles, then you might forget the first one, right? And it happens. Next, underline key points the author make and mark the data that is most important or that appears questionable. After this, the important skill is summarizing the paper. So after the first read through, try to summarize the paper in 1 or 2 sentences and try to provide an answer as for a specific question. And I think almost good researchers are doing this practice. If you can succinctly describe a paper, you have probably recognized the question that authors started with and answer they provided, right? And if you focus on the main idea, then that will be ultimately help you to gain the insight into more specific details and which exactly you need while writing a research paper. Indeed, if you summarize the paper 1 or 2 sentences is easy, go back and try to deepen your outline by summarizing the 3 or 4 most important subpoints of the main idea. So in this skill, it is most important to summarize or having a focus on the main idea. And if possible, lastly, compare the paper to other works, right? Summarizing the paper is one way to try to determine the scientific contribution of the paper, but to really gauge the scientific merit, you must compare the paper to others' work in that area so you can able to recognize it, the novelty and the idea. And even you can answer this question that have they appeared before, the same question, or some of authors have addressed the same thing. It is worth mentioning that scientific contribution can take one many forms. Some papers offer new ideas, others implement that ideas and show how they work. Others bring previous ideas together and unite them under the novel framework. Now, knowing others' work in the area can help you to determine which sort of contribution a paper is actually making. And even you get the insight for your research paper as well. So to be summarized, these 5 skills are amazingly important for reading the research paper. First is read critically, read creatively, make a notes, summarize the paper, and compare the paper. Right? For for the next, I will be talking to you that from this, one small thing you can do for any paper, or you can start doing this practice for preparing one page review, and it should include the following things: a 1 or 2 sentences summary of the paper. Secondly, a deeper, more extensive outline of the main point of the paper, including assumptions made, arguments presented, data analyzed, and conclusion drawn. Thirdly, any limitations or extensions that will create your help you to create your idea, because metaphor of any article that will build up your thinking. And finally, your opinion for paper, the quality of the idea and the potential impact. If you are reading some article, then please try these strategies, because it will help you out and it will conceptualize about that article. Thank you for listening. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Stay home, stay safe.